Thanks, Chuck. Another little loose end that I think we should probably tie up, especially for those who are watching on the live streaming, because we have a lot more people that are part of this conference than just who are here. It occurred to me that many of them, and maybe some here too, have not really heard Shelli's story about the book. And would you come up and share that story, how that happened? You can bring him. Yeah, he's kind of a part of it too. So, yeah, Carlos and Shelli, we've known them since the year 2000. So, it'd be okay to give a little bit of a testimony too, and how you got here. So.
Okay. Wow, well, he told me I was supposed to give you a little bit of a testimony, and thanks to my brother Dave, who says they can't refute your testimony, I'm going to go forward. That used to be my favorite time when I was a child. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and my favorite thing was the testimony time because my faith was built up. I couldn't relate to everything that every preaching or things that were said, but I really related to people's testimony. So I appreciate that word, Dave. Carlos and I, we're worship leaders, and we've had the privilege of being kicked out of church twice. Really 3 times, so don't get jealous. Just remember, we're all on the same team. And we moved here to Minnesota. Carlos is my my date guy. So we moved to Minnesota in January of 1999. And we moved here, and we moved up for Carlos's job, and also because we were going to be worship leaders in a little Assembly of God church.
We'd been cast out for a while.
Well, we'd been cast out. Well, honey, yeah, twice.
That was a different thing.
It was a different thing. So we moved from Champaign, Illinois, and when Carlos was busy doing his job, and when it came time to move, I went back to Champaign to move the household myself. Isn't that nice of him? Just let me move all of that stuff all by myself. And when I was there, I stayed at a friend's house, and these are friends that we really love, the Reicherts. And Judy Reichert had just had a visit from Ron Oja and Steve Jones. Is that correct? Was it those you two boys that had just gone through? And we were in her house, and for those of you who went to the Tabernacles Conference in 2001, it was held in Judy and Scott Reichert's house, and they have like this gymnasium that's in their house. Oh, it was 2000. Sorry, it's 2000. And we were sitting up at the top of the gymnasium because her sewing room was real close to there, and we were talking sewing, and she said, "Shelli, there's just something I have to tell you." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "But what I'm going to tell you is heresy." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "But I believe it." And I said, "Okay." And she said to me, "Which one of your children would you want to condemn to death?" I said, "Well, none of them, Judy. I have 4 children. I love them all." And she says, "Do you believe that your love is more or less perfect than the Father's?" And I said, "Well, I know my love is less perfect than the Father's." And she says, "Well, how could a father whose love is perfect ever condemn any one of his children to death?" And she said, "What if I told you that God gets everyone?" And here's my response. This is a pivotal moment in my life. And I said, "I believe that." I didn't think about it. I knew, and I always say that it was like the Grinch that stole Christmas, and his heart grew 4 times its original size. So I could no longer slough off those people that I wasn't going to spend eternity with. I had to love everybody. Well, that was a really good thing. So when we were in Champaign, Urbana, come over here, honey. Oh, when we were in Champaign-Urbana, we were leading worship, and one of the things that we always did, because after we led worship, I felt very vulnerable. I felt like I'd been intimate with the Father, and that we'd all been intimate with the Father, and I would, after we were no longer, I guess maybe in his presence anymore, can I say that? Or in a different way, I would always run to the back of the sanctuary, and I would go out of the sanctuary, and I'd go in the coat closet and just decompress. I did it every Sunday. I never knew why I did it, but I always would run out the door, and I would get myself back together, and then I'd come back in and sit at the back of the church.
You know, it felt like we were coming back off of the front lines, because we were just right up there, you know, and it was very, it was intense, you know. And we'd come back, and you know, in many ways it still feels that way, but we retreat back into the prayer closet, you know, and it was literally a closet. It was a coat closet. So one Sunday morning, January 1991. See, I need him. So January 1991, we led worship. Seemed like any other time that we led worship. And what did I do? I ran for the coat closet, and I'm sorry to tell you in front of everybody, but my husband has a vice. He loves coffee. I ran to the coat closet, he ran to the coffee machine, and then he ran to the coat closet. And it was meant to be. It was meant to be. So when I was in the coat closet, I wasn't there very long, and this guy came up to me, nondescript kind of guy. The only thing I remember, or I think that I remember, is that he had on a pair of blue jeans and a brown plaid shirt. He wasn't tall, he wasn't short, he wasn't heavy, he wasn't thin. He's just an ordinary guy, a dude, you know? Never pick him out in a crowd. No, you have to speak into the mic. Yeah, when they say that. I'll yell. Okay. So he said to me, now I've never seen him before, and he said to me, I really enjoyed your worship this morning. And I said, well, thank you very much. And he said, I have a gift for you. At this point in time, it was like all bells and whistles were going off. I thought, what the heck, and where is my husband? You know, where is he? This guy wants to give me a gift. I have no idea what this is, you know. And he had a book. And he handed me this book, and I said, I don't want to take your only copy. I refused it. And he said, oh, don't worry, there's a lot more where that one came from. And he said, and Carlos had come over at this time, and he said, be warned, this book comes with a warning. And I said, okay. He said, be careful with whom you share this book. And I'm wondering what in the world is going on. Right. And so I tried to refuse the book. I got the book anyway. And so I look at Carlos, and since I was a child, I have been a copyright reader. I look at the copyright date of every song. I look at the copyright date of every book. And the first thing I did was I looked in that book. And I did what? What I have been programmed to do my whole life. I looked at the copyright date. And we are January of 1991. And the book that we received, the copyright date was 1994. 1994. In fact, it was the second or the third edition. Yes. It was the third edition of this book. And the first edition didn't even come out for 4 more months. And that's when go ahead. It said all the editions. And all the editions and the dates, and I'm like, well, the first edition isn't even out yet.
And this is when I said those infamous words. Well, what kind of a two-bit operation is this that they can't even proofread their copyright date? Okay, was there a little stinky pride there? Yeah. And so...
I went right along with it. I mean,
You were stinky too, honey. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I thought the same way.
So I went and I thought, well, where is this guy? And I look up, and now this has happened very quickly, right, within a very short period of time. And the church where we were, there was a very long hall, and there was only one door to get out of the church. And it was raining cats and dogs. And this guy, I never saw the door. I never heard the door. I never saw everything was dry. I looked for him in the in the sanctuary later. This guy just wasn't there. The guy who gave me the book. And so me, in my loving Christian heart, said to Carlos, you take this book, I don't want it.
It was just enough time for her to look at the copyright and then have me look at it and have her look at it. We look up.
And he's gone.
Vanished.
Down, and the hall is probably the length of a football field. Right? So, you entertain angels unaware, and you say bad things about your brother that you love, in the future. So, anyway, we were soon asked to, we soon had the left foot of fellowship from that church, and then had sort of another left foot of fellowship from another church, and then we moved up here to Champaign-Urbana.
Moving very quickly, of course.
Right, or from Champaign-Urbana up here to Minnesota.
So something weird happened in 1993 at that church, and then that led to the one thing, and then we were...
Let's not talk about 1993.
Yeah, it was just one thing after another, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
That has to do with Masonic. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
See me in the back. I don't want this on tape. 1993. So anyway.
94, 95.
Remember that we're already now in our story. We are up here, right, in Champaign-Urbana. I've just moved my stuff up, and Judy Reichert has told me of Restoration of All Things. Okay? I come home and I tell Carlos, now we're moving and we're leading worship in a little church, and so we're super busy. And I told Carlos, what if God could get everyone? And I told him everything that Judy Reichert had told me, and I said, and I believe it. And he said, I do too. And then we got the phone call, and the phone call was from Judy, and she said, Scott is insistent that we come up and introduce you to Steve Jones. And Scott never travels. He never insists on anything like this. So I think it was within a week or two, Scott and Judy were up in our house, and we were still in the church. And Carlos says, well, Scott and Judy are going to come up, and we're going to listen to what they say, but we're not going to change our mind. And, me being the good wife, I said, okay. And Steve came over and he explained the law. Go ahead.
I wanted to believe it.
I know you did.
Yeah.
You can be vulnerable here. Tell us about it, honey.
I just knew it was going to require me like starting all over. It was a complete reset of everything that I knew. Thank God, Stephen was here. God moved us here so that
we could be by them.
Yeah, Stephen could answer my question. It took a lot of question and answer. Stephen was very patient.
No,
this is 2000.
I'm
now.
sorry if I'm confusing you.
We move fast. I was concerned about that. Well, it's okay. I mean, we're doing good. We moved all the way through the 90s, and meanwhile, this book it was in my office for a while. I looked at it, and God put me into a sleep when I was reading it every lunch, and I just couldn't.
Gosh.
I couldn't.
You said that on tape.
Yes.
I'm moving over here in case there's lightning.
I mean, we were so Pentecost at that time. I mean, there was no other way to explain it. And that's the shorthand, but I mean, you all know what we're talking about. And so anytime I tried to read this book, I couldn't, I just couldn't, it wasn't making any traction in my mind.
No, this is 1999, okay?
Right.
So actually, this is when April of 2000, Judy Reichard and Scott Reichard came to our house, and they said they wanted to bring Stephen. And that's when Carlos said, well, we're not going to change what we think. And I said, okay. And then Stephen came and he explained a couple of things, and I said, I believe it. I was so excited.
You have to tell the Pharaoh stories, you tell why.
Oh, yes. Okay, because this is going to reveal something now. Okay. So when we were in the church, I do believe the Bible. And the pastor at the time was talking about the children of Israel leaving, the children coming out of Egypt. And we were reading that, and me being the average Joe Christian, I've never really read all that Old Testament stuff, or I heard it like a kid's version of it, when I was, and here we are, and we're reading this story, and it said, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And I got ticked. And it said, and Pharaoh wanted to repent, but God hardened his heart. And I was so angry at God. I said, how dare you? You condemned him to an eternal torture forever and ever and ever. And that means you love me more than you love Pharaoh. And if you do, then your love is not just. So I was sitting in my bed reading the Bible. I slammed the Bible. Please love me after I tell you this. I threw the Bible across the room. It hit the wall, and it laid in a clump on the floor, and the pages were crinkled. And every morning, I would kick that Bible to and from because it was right by the door to the bathroom. Every time I went by that Bible, I kicked it. I was so angry at God. I was so angry that his love was not just. And every night, my faithful, sweet honey would try to explain to me what was going on in this hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And every night he had some new revelation, and it was 5 minutes long or 30 minutes long, I don't know. But every single night I said, thank you very much, honey, I don't believe it. And I kicked the Bible the next day.
And with each new day, I believed it less.
Right.
Well.
So then I think that must have been in early March or maybe February of 2000, and Judy and Scott Reichard decide that they're going to come up and talk to us about restoration of all things. Now, remember, my Bible's still in a heap upstairs. I have not looked at that Bible. I've only kicked it. And Stephen told me that God got Pharaoh, and it changed everything for me. I was so thrilled. And I'm telling you that I was the one who said that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And when I was telling this story, I said, and this is for you, Ron, God hardened Pharaoh's fart. And anyway, it was a very stinky mess. And then Stephen got me out of it. And I used to always refer to it as my friend Pharaoh. God loves my friend Pharaoh, so I know he loves me. So just a little side note, when Ron and Steve came to our house the first time, it was just them. And then we had to go on, and of course we were worship leaders, and we were in the middle of a big Easter musical. And so Judy says, well, Scott and Ron are going to come over, and we're going to have a meeting. And I said, fine, I've got to go and do this rehearsal, and then I'll come back. And when I pulled into my driveway, there were I couldn't get in my driveway. There were tons of cars. And I walked up to my front door, and this lady opened the door, and she said, "Hi, who are you?" I said, "Hi, I'm Shelli. I live here." She goes, "Oh, come on in." Okay. Okay. And all of a sudden, I think there were 30 people that were there. Margaret, were you there then? Okay. I know Tad was there, and Ron was there, and it was a whole bunch of other people, and I don't remember who all was there. And so anyway, as it is with all of you, when you learn about what Stephen teaches, and when you meet Stephen, your days are numbered. And shortly after that Easter musical, we were asked to leave the church. I made the horrible mistake of saying that I felt overworked and underappreciated. And hold on, this is what got me kicked out. And I said, sometimes I feel like I prostitute my talent here. Never mind the fact that when they were talking bad about people in staff meetings, I called them staff infections. I mean, there's no hope for me. You guys think that Bob is bad? Just look at the back of the room. And I knew that things were really going to get bad when one morning when we were called to lead worship, I walked into the office and the pastor's wife was there, and I said, "Hi," and she didn't speak to me. And I said, "Well, you know me, I'm like a kid, maybe they didn't hear me. Hi," tail waggling, "Hi." No word, and I knew I was in trouble. And she said, I said, "Whatever it is that I did, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. Please forgive me. I would never intentionally do anything bad to hurt you or anything, or I have no idea what I've done. All right, I'm apologizing for things I'm making up in my mind, right?" So I started to cry. And I just cried and cried and cried. And then I had to go and stand in front of that church and lead worship. And I was undone. I led worship, and then we had to sit on the front row and listen to the sermon, knowing that as soon as we got out of service, that we were going to be in trouble. I knew it wasn't Carlos, because Carlos is never in trouble. I mean, in case you want to know who the good person is, it's Carlos. So after the service, we go into the office of the pastor, and he had one of those desks that was like kind of elevated, and so you kind of felt like you were in a judge's chamber. It was like a really big, it was elevated, and I was sitting down, and it was Carlos here on this side, Mercy, was on my right, and Judgment, the pastor's wife, was on my left. And I got accused of something, and the pastor said, "My wife thinks that you love too much." And I was taken back, and I said, "What?" "My wife thinks that you love too much." And it was a real come to Jesus moment for me. And I said, "But I don't love too much. I'm supposed to lay down my life for my brothers, and I'm here to tell you."
Go ahead, tell them.
"I don't know if I would die for my brothers. I don't know."
The staff at this church were advised not to get too close to people, and because,
I was told that at the very beginning. Don't have dinner with any of these people. And I said, how can you serve them if you don't love them? That's how I went into this.
But it's some sort of protection mechanism that they have, with the clergy that, is to prevent people from getting too close so that they know too much about you and they spread things about you and things like that.
So here I am in crisis because Shelli realize I have an inferior love. I serve a God with a superior love, and I want to be like him, but my love falls short. I don't even know. I said, if I was really honest, I don't even know, and I don't think any of us do. I think I would die for my children and my husband, but I don't know who else outside of that I would die for. And I was undone. And I said, how can you accuse me of loving too much? And he says, no, she thinks you love me too much. And my reaction was just like how I am, I'm just me.
Let's wait for a second.
Okay. They want to know.
Is there any good answer to that?
Yes, I do.
What
No,
do
you don't.
say?
Yes, I do. No, you don't. So what I said was the honest truth. I said, I'm not physically attracted to you at all. Why would I want you when I have Carlos? Was that the truth? Doesn't every girl think that she should have the very best guy? Don't you walk in here and you think, I've got the very best guy? I think that every day when I wake up. I got the very best guy, and this is what Carlos did. He stretched his legs, and the meeting came to an end. We didn't get the door until July, but
But
then
it got progressively more difficult.
it got progressively worse. Meanwhile, we're still meeting with Stephen, and after I said that I felt like I prostituted my talent in that church. Now that's a word, right? That's a verb. That was a strong word. I didn't say a cuss word. It's not a cuss word to say prostitute. But anyway, they said that I had said something so foul that the pastor, when he said he wanted to get rid of us, he said that I'd said something so foul that he could not say it to his wife of 30-some years. And the people wanted to know what it was that I said. I was told to never say it and never reveal it. And then, after we left the church, we heard, because nobody was ever allowed to talk to us, and remember, we had just moved here, so we had no friends. And I was told that the people said, if Shelli has a problem, we love her. Can't you bring her back? Because he was a clinical psychiatrist as well. And can't we help her? And he says, well, really what it is she's suicidal. And I'm telling him that. And so then, after that just didn't kind of make it for a while, they said, well, if she's suicidal, let's help her. And then he said, well, really what the problem is that Shelli has a multiple personality disorder. And so do I, and so do I, and so do I.
So the Shelli you see at church is not the Shelli you see.
So the Shelli you see at church is really not the Shelli. Now, those of you who know me, have you ever seen me not when I'm not the same, like all the time, because there's just like no filter or something? I don't know. Anyway, so when we left the church, when it was July the 4th of 2000, we walked right into the arms of Steve and Darla. How good is God? How good is God?
Yeah, they were the only fellowship we had in the whole world at that point. You know, I suppose we could have done worse.
Boy, I move on that side. I only need him for one more date, and then I'm sending him back.
What kind of date?
So, July of 2000, now that's where we are, July of 2000, okay? And we are unpacking the boxes of our house. We've lived there since 1999, and we haven't unpacked anything. We've been so busy serving in the church. And this has been a long process, and you know, when I came in to know the Father, I had a crisis of faith, and I asked Jesus to be my Savior, and then I was a Passover Christian. The next movement of God in my life, I had another crisis of faith when somebody said to me in the Baptist church, "You're the most spiritual person I know." And I thought, I am the most wretched person I know. I knew my life. And I said, "Okay, God, it's been nice knowing you. If there's nothing more to you, then so long, farewell. But if there is something more to you, I would like to know about it." The next week, I sang at a Pentecostal church, and I never left the Pentecostal church. So I moved from Passover into Pentecost. Now, I believe that when we met Stephen and Darla, that we moved from that Pentecostal expression into a Tabernacles expression. But it didn't come without a crisis of faith. You know, we got kicked out of the church. We had no friends, none whatsoever.
And I had no basis, you know, for foundation in my faith. You know, everything that I thought I knew, I didn't really know. You know,
and we came home that day from church to Carlos's mother and dad, and we were sitting at the dinner table, and I was undone, and Carlos's mom, in her sweetness, was telling me very bad things about how fat I was, and then shortly then I turned 40. I was pretty much undone. And so Carlos continues to unpack these boxes. You know, we've been out of the church for a while. And
while we were in the church, we never had time.
We never had, yes.
They expected us to be there all the time. You know, I mean, that's the way it is when you're, you know, in a position like that. You really need to, you know, be there whenever the doors are open. And you know, it's somehow the rules of taking vacations and things like that didn't apply to us at all. So we had nothing. We had no time at all. So we still had boxes from when we were moving, you know, all in our house. So we had a chance to do that. Finally had a chance to actually move into our home.
So I'm upstairs in the kitchen, and Carlos is downstairs unpacking boxes, and my crisis comes to a head. I said, "Father, I love you. But every way that you can be abused in the church, I've been abused. Physically, sexually, emotionally, spiritually, I have been abused every way, and I don't think that I can take another abuse and survive it with my love for you intact." I said, "I'm sorry, I am such a wretched child, but I'm going to ask you for a sign. I need to know. I need to know that what Stephen Jones is teaching me is the truth, and that I will not be hurt again." And I said, "So I'm going to ask you for a sign." Less than 2 minutes later, up from the basement walks Carlos Ricci, and he is paler than I have ever seen him in my life. He has a total expressionless face on him, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, He's gotten a bad phone call, or I didn't know what it was. And he handed me something, and it was a book. He had been unpacking a box, and he had found a copy of Creation's Jubilee, which didn't make sense because we were reading the 4th edition, the big one with the pretty cover.
Yeah, Stephen was discipling us.
And Stephen was discipling us, and he goes, how did a copy of Creation's Jubilee get in a box?
Yeah, an old one. It was
the first edition. How did the first edition get in a box?
It was the 3rd edition.
I always think that's why I need him. So how did the 3rd edition get in a box that we moved from Illinois?
I'm looking at this box from Illinois. It was sealed. It had come from Illinois. I know that all the books in there came from there, and here I had been just the week before in Stephen's office looking. He had an older copy. He had an old copy of that book. And so it wasn't computing. I was holding this book, and it just didn't make any sense. And then it occurred to Shelli.
That's the book that was handed to us in the coat closet.
So then it really hit me.
Now, how good is your daddy when he would know in 1991 that I was going to need a sign in 2000 about this? How good is your daddy that he would put all those things together? And you know what? I now know, because God loves Pharaoh, he loves you just as much as he loves me. It's all the same. He loves us all the same. Right? So if you ever wonder if we think that we owe a debt of gratitude to Steve and Darla, we most certainly do. We love them. God has used them mightily in our lives, and I want to publicly apologize for calling his operation a 2-bit one. I think it's at least 3 or 4 now. Sorry, Stephen.
And I also thank God that he brought me definitely the greatest Bible teacher in the world to, help me through this crisis.
Carlos had questions. I was just in love. I was so happy that God loved everybody and he got everybody. I was overwhelmed with that. So
I couldn't rest until I could speak to someone else about it. You know how that is. You have to take it in, but in order to be able to spit it out so that it's meat for someone, and not vomit or something like that. You know what I mean? It needs to be something substantial. So we needed to. Okay.
So we love you guys. Thank you so much. So now you know about the book. You know that things can move in and out of time. And you know that Steve's operation is now 4 bits.
Yeah, the Lord gives us some fun times once in a while, huh? Oh, dear. By the way, that same afternoon, I walked in about a half hour later, because it happened to be a Saturday, and we just went on down there every week for a while, every Saturday, just to talk and fellowship, and, other people came too, and so it provided them with some fellowship, and we really enjoyed it as well. And so anyway, so I walked in, and Shelli was still shrieking over the whole story, and so I said, "What's wrong?" Ah. I do a very poor imitation, Shelli, but yeah. Anyway, so she told me the story, And at first there, she didn't quite realize what had happened, because she was just thinking, oh my goodness, what a coincidence. She got this book a long time ago, and here it is 9 years later now. And so how I do things, I always ask, when did this happen? Give me a date. That's the only way I know why something has happened. Give me a date. So, we got this back in 91. Well, I'm thinking 91. Well, that's good. That's when I wrote it. I started writing it the end of September of 90, and I finished on March 18. I remember the date very specifically, because that's the date that I got a $2,000 check in the mail to go and get it printed, and to get 1,000 of them printed, and the print shop guy said he'd do it for $2,084, and I told him, well, I only got 2,000. Yeah, well, if you write me a check today up front, I'll do it for 2,000. So there it went. And so I asked them, they said 1991. I said, well, what time, and do you know specifically when? Well, they said, well, it was cold out, and they figured it out that it was in January or late January. And I said, well, I didn't even finish writing the book until March 18. And so it's like, whoa, and that's when I lost my hair, and it was weird. And then to have a later edition from 1994, they got the 94 edition in 1991. It's like, boy, this is really, really weird. So anyway, I just thought that the Lord could have saved me a whole lot of work if He'd have given me a copy ahead of time. But no, He made me sweat it out and work it out and write it all and everything else. And I don't know. The Lord doesn't allow us to be lazy. He makes us do it all anyway, There's no shortcuts there. Oh well. It is a great story. So that's one of the angel stories, but she didn't realize it was an angel at the time until 2000. It took 9 years to recognize that. But she had some other angel stories too from 1995 in association with, or was it 96? 95? Yeah. And so anyway, a lot of you have great stories to tell, and I wish we had all the time in the world to have everybody tell their story, because ultimately everybody has a story of how did you get here, since your mother gave birth, how did you get here, And everybody's story is very interesting, because it's everybody's story is about is the way in which God has led you up to this point, and really it's His story. And it's always very interesting. So anyway.